Welcome to the Flower Essence Podcast, and join us on an exploration of the healing wisdom of flowers.
With combined decades of experience in the study and practice of flower essence therapy, I, Kathleen Aspenns, and co-host Rochana Felde guide you to reconnect to nature with these potent vibrational remedies.
Welcome back to the podcast. We took a little summer vacation and now we're back in the late summertime. It is sort of a swing season between the summer and fall, and it's recognized in Chinese medicine as its own season. And Rochana and I were both talking a little bit about the differences and similarities between the ideas of this season in Chinese medicine and Ayurveda. So we thought we'd do a little podcast talking about that and talking about some essences that can support you in navigating this season. So welcome back.
Hey, yeah, good to see you again.
Indeed. We were talking a little bit about how in Ayurvedic, now you were telling me that this is its own season, the late summer, or is it a bridge season?
Well, it depends on who you read or how deep you go into the Ayurvedic information. Really, in general, it's considered to have three seasons that correlate with the three doshas of Pitta, Vata, and Kapha, and so that sort of starts at the beginning of, I think May, and then the more in-depth information about the Ayurvedic seasons will break that down into 6 seasons, and then even like 12 cycles, and they get very in-depth and complex because it's not just about looking at the seasons and how that interacts with a person's individual constitution, but it's also the transition time between the seasons and the transition time even between those 6 segments of the wheel of the year. So there's a lot going on there, but in a nutshell, the transition times are the ones that you see more disease taking root, and the late summer is kind of akin to early fall, I think, is how we're matching it up between TCM and Ayurveda. And so that's what we're looking at today is this late summer, early fall time in Ayurveda. It's July 15th to September 15th.
Yeah, and like you were saying, that premise that the season itself is one thing, but the shift between seasons is the part that the body gets stressed a little bit. And, when the body is stressed, the mind and the spirit are also a bit stressed as well. So to be able to support ourselves, to support our entire beings as we navigate these changes and shifts, I think that's really what's useful for bringing in some essences and to kind of talk about the conceptual underpinnings of how we help ourselves navigate these changes with flower essences. And, there's so much change going on right now in the world. And then we have seasonal shifts as well. So the fall seems to have kind of come a little bit early, to my mind, in the emotional tone of what's going on in the world right now. It seems like there's a lot of loss, a lot of sort of feelings of grief and, surrounding the pandemic and surrounding the economic situation. And, I think that's kind of just the wave is just starting to come upon us. But I think we're all feeling it underneath. And what can we do to help, navigate these changes and be as stable as we can possibly be throughout them?
Yeah, absolutely. The what's going on in the global consciousness is such a huge part of it. And then we have these energetic influences from the seasons. And what's really interesting about early fall, late summer, is that with the different doshas or constitutions in Ayurveda, each one has times of the year that they're more aggravated than the others. So, for example, the Pitta dosha might be more aggravated by the heat of summer. But all the doshas, all three of them, are aggravated at this time of year. And it's the only time of year that happens. So I think that's a really, really interesting thing that we know, there's fall, we're transitioning from this outward summertime to things starting to decline, and the light starts to change, and there's just an interesting feeling in the air that's hard to describe. And, there's good parts. It's not just all bad, of course, but it can be aggravating. The energies of it can be aggravating to the energy, especially combined with the energy of what's going on in the world. And I really see that happening this year. Obviously, there's a lot of concern about COVID and the economy and finances and getting back to work. And there's so many things to worry about as far as the peace and things that are happening around the globe. It goes on and on. The news cycle is endless. It always is, and it's especially just on steroids more now than I feel like ever in my life. So there's this inflammation and irritation happening in the energy of the world, and that can definitely be a part of this aggravated feeling that is happening personally to us. That's also being aggravated by the weather or by the seasons and the changing of the light.
Right. And the Chinese medicine energetic, in the summertime, it's very expansive and outward, and all that heart energy, all that fire energy. And then we shift into the season of fall, sort of as we've passed the solstice where that energy was peak and outward, and then the energy starts to shift and turn back inward. And so when the energy is going outward, it has a certain sort of protective quality because everything that's outside stays out because the energy is pushing outward. But when it shifts and starts to come back inward, then it brings everything in with it. It brings environmental heat with it. It can bring pathogens in with it. It can, it just, in general, the tone and the mood of the world kind of comes back in there with it as well. So we're encountering a lot of these heat aggravations and just, it's this miasm of the trouble of the world and the strain of the world right now that's really coming in and touching us in the center of our being. And that's where we can look at supporting. I know that with my clients, I'm having these conversations again and again with, okay, this is what we need to do to help support you. And these are also some practices that you can apply in order to help stabilize yourself, because we can't change what's going on in the world, at least, not to a great extent, but we do have a lot of control over what we do ourselves and how we interact with our with our inner spaces, let's say.
I like what you say about that energy that's outward kind of turning back and coming in and getting all of that directed towards you, because it corresponds with what Ayurveda looks at that they talk about called impressions. So whatever is aggravating is reduced by modifying or reducing the aggravating impression. And those impressions are what come into the consciousness through your senses. And so that's going to be things that, everything that you see, everything that you hear, touch, taste, feel, and part of working with that to reduce the aggravation is to adjust what you see. So in our modern day world, I would liken that to mass media and what you're watching and what you're consuming every day on TV, on social media. That is an impression that is getting into your consciousness and feeding fear and the anxiety and the worry. And if in order to reduce that, going on a media diet is a really great thing to do right now. And but it's all the senses. So it's what you're hearing, what kind of music you're listening to, how you can just control your environment to make things more peaceful for you, and cultivating an awareness of that.
Yeah, I that's an interesting. I've never heard it framed quite that way, but yeah, that's exactly it. Is taking charge of the inputs to the degree that you have, and really managing, your media consumption, and whether that media is news, whether that media is entertainment or what have you, but managing that for your mental health is really important. And you can do a lot to calming your nervous system and to keeping yourself centered and grounded by managing what you let in, what you decide to read or to watch or to be exposed to. So that's an important balancing factor. Is let's not wait until you've gone completely over the edge of freaking out. Let's back away from Facebook a little bit, or back away from cable news, because it's really, they're designed to keep you going. The media companies are really, really smart at feeding your lizard brain, at feeding the fear, at feeding your desire to want to just keep scrolling and to keep watching, and they're selling that to the highest bidder. So, step away.
It becomes addictive. It's feeding that dopamine, or whatever the brain chemical is that is, you're getting some sort of feedback from it that makes you want more.
And I'll start throwing in the season of relationship to the Chinese medicine approach, that the late summer is the season of the spleen. And I clearly remember the first time I was talking to somebody, a practitioner, and they were talking about spleen, and I'm like, what? The spleen? What are you talking about? But it's really quite interesting. And the spleen is not, when we say spleen, we're going to use capital S spleen. And it's not just the organ, the spleen, but it's an organ system, and its relationship with all of the body's systems. And the spleen is considered to have a spirit. One of the aspects of consciousness resides in this organ system, and that spirit is called the yi. And it's the energy of your intellect. And this fits in with that media diet concept. With, if you're using a lot of your mental energy in processing, 24 hours of news, that's probably kind of, putting a pressure, let's say, on your spleen, on that energetic that's helping you to think about things and synthesize concepts and bringing ideas together. And when that spleen gets stressed, when the spleen is out of balance, then the emotion affiliated with that is going to be worry. And I don't think it's too hard to figure out how spending a lot of time watching cable news or doom scrolling on Facebook is going to make you start to feel worried. And then the essences, obviously, you can start seeing how essences can start fitting in and supporting the energetics that we're talking about, and helping to work with kind of building up your reserves, building up your discretion, your focus, and your ability to decide to disengage. Because what happens when you worry is you get caught in this rumination, in this just spin cycle that you just cannot let go of. And that's usually one of the first, it's certainly a lot of times a starting place with a lot of clients is, I'll ask, how do you sleep? When you try to go to bed, when you try to sleep, does your mind just start going into the spin, 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 worry, 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 create lists, all of the things that we all know and love, very familiar. And that's a white chestnut situation, which it helps you to balance out and help you kind of come off of that hamster wheel of worry and anxiety and just that uncomfortable, unpleasant spin that it was what happens when your spleen gets a little bit weak. I'm sure you're familiar with this also.
Oh yeah, and the chestnuts that are just, that whole family has something for this time. So I would add maybe some jade elixir, thinking about it from that Ayurvedic standpoint, to get that peace and cooling and calming energy, also grounding because it's a stone. This Pitta time of year, which is still hot and aggravating in that way, talks about the Pitta imbalance of the mind, and that mental emotional work that is also helpful is cultivating like peace and compassion, courtesy, releasing anger, resentment, frustration, practicing non-judgment and acceptance, and listening to other points of view. So this is where we're talking about the media cycle and the social media, and people have very strong points of view, and it's easy to get caught up into this duality of sides, or holding on to your belief system and not seeing the other points. So cultivating like surrender about what's going on and some receptivity to other points of view, and then really spiritually praying for peace or putting the energy for peace out there into the world. So I see that fitting in with what you're talking about with worry, because this worry about the world, this feeling of not being able to control, being out of control, really goes hand in hand with this wanting, this need that I see right now to cultivate this energy of peace, and that works really well together. So it's really interesting, these two different lenses that we're seeing it through. And the jade essence would be a perfect complement with the chestnuts, and so would some of the other gem elixirs, I think, like pearl. In the pearl essence, the Alaskan essence that I use, it talk about how it dissolves built up layers of irritation, which here we go again. We've got all of this irritation built up, especially right now from all these months in the pandemic, and inflexibility, and this mental inflexibility. And pearl is actually traditionally classically used as a gem elixir in Ayurvedic medicine, where it's used to calm the mind and emotions and, promote love and peace. So I think that's a really lovely way to see that the traditional use, and they make gem elixirs by soaking the gems in, like a strong alcohol, and sometimes for as long as, a month or so, depending on the gem. So it's a little bit different than the way the essence, gem elixirs are made, but it's, the energy of the stone is coming through either way.
Oh, fascinating. And it's also, part of Taoist medicine as well, is making those sorts of preparations. And it's funny how you're talking about jade and pearl, and I'm thinking, just earlier today I put on my jade pendant with Guan Yin because I was really feeling that need. And then I thought, what earrings do I want to wear when I do the podcast today? And I put on some mother of pearl earrings. So we're completely in alignment. I was just following that feeling of like, what energy do I want? Yeah, and you're wearing pearl too. It's like you can do that for yourself also, to think about what will support you, what energies will support you through your day. So totally get your accessories aligned with the season and with what's going to support you. I love that we both were on the same page with that. So
That's
funny.
really funny. I haven't worn this necklace in, I don't know, a long time too. And like Pearl called out to me, Jade called out to me today.
There you go. Listen to the voices. You can get the medicine in so many different ways, and that's one of the fun things about Ayurvedic medicine is that's, if I understand it correctly, that's part of it too. Is the colors you're wearing and the gems you're wearing and all of those pieces come together with supporting your whole being.
Yeah, and what's soothing to you? So, there's lots of information and about what colors, especially, what pitta reducing colors are, for example, but the thing is what helps you feel calm? Just go with that. If it's blue, if it's green, if it's, whatever it is, whether you wear it or whether you see it in your environment, or whether you just close your eyes and imagine the color, that is a way to get that color energy into your space and to help it do its work.
Mm. And I love to change out my computer's desktop, depending on the season or depending on what I'm needing, with an image of a plant or a flower or a gem that speaks to me. So I have that kind of energy radiating at me as I sit at my computer for way too many hours in the day.
Yeah. And what else is interesting is that Deborah Creighton, who we've had as a guest on the podcast, she has actually a whole line of color elixirs. So that's another way to explore color therapy energetically.
Awesome. Yeah, you're right. I'd forgotten that. But yes, she has these wonderful color light elixirs that are like, ooh, sounds so good when you need a little more pink in your life or a little more whatever in your life.
Right.
You can go that route.
And maybe you don't want to wear it because it's not your shade.
That's true. Yes, not everyone can look great in pink. But I could bring out some pink flowers that would be quite useful as well. It's not true pink, but the red chestnut fits into this scheme of what we're talking about. It's sort of a pinky red. It's not super red. The red chestnut is kind of one of my signature plants because my out of balance mindset is worrying about everyone. I get so fixated on worrying about my family or my pets, and I can wake up in the middle of the night and just be like, are they still there? Oh my God, what's going to happen? And then you just start to spin these just dreadful fantasies about horrible things happening to them. And, that's not intuition. That's just worry. That's just, let's just break that cycle. So when I find myself slipping into that, which happens, it happens to everyone that we slip back into our patterns, I pull out the red chestnut because it's amazing how quickly it can shift you out of that pattern, even if you've gotten a little deep into it. Is red chestnut one that you also use quite a bit?
Oh my gosh, yes, especially lately, as you know.
Yeah. Life is stressful, isn't it? It's really stressful right now.
Yeah. And, I just went through the process Kathleen knows about having a sick elderly dog who unfortunately passed away. And the last few months have been a red chestnut bonanza because of my worry for her. And then after the passing, so dealing with all the grief, feeling like that worry stuck in me and I couldn't release it, even though there was nothing, there was nothing left to worry about, I guess you could say. And the red chestnut really has helped let that go. So I never thought about using it that way before. So, I called Kathleen for some input. Thank you. And, it makes sense when you're in the moment worrying, or like what you're talking about, you can't sleep at night because, you're just, all those worrisome thoughts come in about the people and pets and things that you might be worried about. But I didn't think of it because after my pooch passed, that object of worry was no longer happening, not on this plane. It's not, she wasn't here anymore. So I was describing this feeling of stuckness, of that worry just seemed like it had nowhere to go. And the red chestnut helped release that beautifully.
That's great.
Yeah.
It works. It really works. It works beautifully. And I was thinking also of one that I've made, the Himalayan chestnut. That's from my Flora of Asia essences. And it has this really beautiful flower that starts out with a pink heart, and then it starts out with a golden heart, and then it turns into a pink heart as it matures and becomes, probably after it gets pollinated and the flower starts to senesce. And what I find is that it helps with the attachment that you feel in your solar plexus area, like the golden color, the attachment to how things should be. And you get concerned about other people's doing things the wrong way, or, all these mental attachments and clingings that we have to the way things ought to be and the way people ought to be living their lives and the things that are happening that are not right. And the Himalayan chestnut helps to elevate that into the heart realm so that you can recognize that, okay, that person has their path, that the situation has its own process. And as much as I would like to be queen and make things right, that's not my place. And it helps me to just disconnect from that will force of like, I want to fix this. This is not right. I just get fixated on it. Everyone does that sometimes. And the Himalayan chestnut helps to release that attachment to the way things should be.
That's a really beautiful essence and such an important energetic for people right now, I think. Yeah.
And then maybe we round out the chestnut family with the sweet chestnut, which is, once again, one of the Bach essences. And this essence is, this is characterized as the dark night of the soul when you just feel despair. And I think that that's something that a lot of people are really staring down the barrel of right now. Mm-hmm. And, we've all had times like this just because... let's see, how do I want to phrase this? I think that when you think of essences to help yourself navigate these times, you don't necessarily have to be in the worst case scenario for sweet chestnut to be helpful. It can be, one part of your life you're feeling a lot of despair around, like a job or what have you, and it doesn't necessarily need to be, the absolute worst case scenario where you need to call a hotline, and those times do happen too. And get help, please. Sweet chestnut can help to release that tension around that. We form this clenching around the pain, around the sorrow, around the despair, and it keeps it from flowing through. And the sweet chestnut helps to release that tension and allow the emotion to flow, because once it can flow, it can release.
Yeah. I would maybe add some pink yarrow to this whole mix. Just that, feeling and being easily upset by emotional disturbances and absorbing all that energy from others and from the world. That pink yarrow, especially for highly sensitive folks, but really everyone's kind of got their sensitivity meter up right now, I guess you could say, in the emotional sense. And that lovely, again, another pink flower, which is interesting. And just love that pink yarrow for that protective, soothing nature, and to not let that stuff in and stick to your energy field.
Yeah, the pink yarrow is something that I use pretty constantly. It comes up a lot. It comes up a lot for animal clients as well, because they tend to, especially dogs and cats who live in our homes with us, they tend to absorb a lot of the energies that are floating around. And a lot of times the animals will start acting out or start, showing signs of stress, even when the people are kind of managing, they seem to be managing okay. And the animals can be these canaries in the coal mine that show the pressures and the tensions. So using something like pink yarrow is useful as well in those cases where it's not just maybe you, but you're also recognizing, oh yeah, what I'm going through is impacting my beloved pets and children, of course, as well. They often act out what's going on in their environment. So pink yarrow kind of all around. And the yarrows in general, I think, are quite useful in this moment. They're useful a lot, but they're certainly useful in this moment for helping to create an energetic shield around what's going on in the world around us. Do you want to talk about the kind of the yarrow family a little bit? Because it's a diverse.
Yeah, well, sure. The white yarrow is the classic kind of protective. I always think of it as an energetic bubble wrap because it's got these I feel like there's a cushiony, padded layer of protection around me that doesn't let in negative energies into my space. And I like to use the pink yarrow just almost with all my clients. I mean, for the highly sensitive person, it's really, it's a key essence. Any empaths, this is an essence to have in your toolbox. One of, the top 5 for sure, I would say. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely.
And then
it's one of the desert island essences, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Except maybe you wouldn't need it on a desert island.
I don't know. True. Okay.
There's no other people around.
Yeah. No one out there to stress you out.
Right. So, yeah. And then the golden yarrow is an interesting one. There's all sorts of variations and colors of the yarrow. And if it's something that you can grow and they're pretty easy to grow, I would recommend growing them and seeing how they, seeing how they come out with the colors. They're a great landscape plant. You could seed your lawn with yarrow. And then if you get a cut, you can use it as a poultice. It's used in herbal medicine quite extensively for bleeding. And so that's an interesting thing to think about too, because I feel like it helps us from letting our energy too just bleed away. It's kind of giving us some boundaries around our energy. And golden yarrow I like to use in cases of more that identity boundaries. How do you like to use it?
Yeah, I agree, and I think that the concept of boundaries when we're talking yarrow, that's exactly right, and it's just boundaries of what sort. So pink yarrow is boundaries around the heart, and by the term boundaries is not fences and walls; it's a permeable boundary. You get to choose what gets to go through, and you get to choose what stays out. And the yarrow helps to guide you to develop these healthy, functional boundaries. And the golden yarrow, that's one that I use whenever there's a case of somebody becoming more in the public eye or developing their ability to be more in the public eye. Because when you are seen, people can project onto you, or you could attract the attention of haters. It's possible. Nobody wants that. And you were mentioning right now with the world, everything is so hot, not just literally hot, but temperamentally hot. You go on Twitter for 2 seconds and, oh my goodness, what is going on there? People are not being kind to one another. And so whenever you're in the public eye, or whenever you are allowing the world to see you, which is important, you have to do that. Golden yarrow can be of great help to help you feel shielded from that, to help them not be able to put so much stuff on you, to be able to hold your full radiance with a layer of protection and shielding and just good health around that. So that's what I use the golden yarrow for. And that's the Flower Essence Society's golden yarrow, which is a very different species from the other yarrows that are around. It has this really remarkably upright growth, very strong dark green foliage, which is very different than a lot of the other yarrow species. So it's quite a different plant in its habit and growth.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention that in herbalism, as I talked about, it's only the white yarrow, Kilea millefolium, that is used in herbal medicine. But what you're saying about everything being hot right now, again, that's that pitta imbalance that that Ayurveda talks about. That fiery, quick to anger energy that's everywhere. And so I would bring in snapdragon as a flower essence for that aggressive communication, lashing out, biting sarcasm energy that is so easily happens, and we all find ourselves sometimes getting caught up in.
Yeah. And, we've talked about aquamarine a million times because it's great. Aquamarine gem essence has that cooling to the mind quality. And I think that it's just one of those essences of the age, because it's just how the world is right now, that everything, our minds and our inputs are sort of constantly under overwhelm from all of the inputs. And it is hard to keep a calm, still mind. And that's when you start thinking about, well, what are your practices? Not only the media diets we're talking about earlier, but, what is your meditation practice, whatever that looks like? What is your movement practice, whatever that looks like? Taking care of your body, finding ways to release things, finding ways to let go of things. It's just basic good health practice to be able to release things like that. I wanted to throw in a couple essences to help when the spleen has been, or the energetics of the spleen are a little bit overwhelmed, when we're kind of overthinking and overworking. And that's also happening because, especially right now, when circumstances are what they are, where we don't really get as much of a break from work. A lot of people are working from home, and the boundaries are not completely there anymore for now I'm resting, and now this is time off, and all of that kind of got thrown into the blender a little bit. The gentian, Dr. Bach's gentian, is one that I use a lot, and it's characterized by sort of the despairing, giving up, disheartenment. But I find that there's a really strong component when there's a spleen picture going on. So when there's an aspect of worry, it fits in with this additional aspect where the tendency is to have getting wrapped up into negative thinking and pessimism. And gentian can help kind of stiffen you a little bit and give you a little more courage and a little bit more ability of stopping that negative thinking pattern and moving it into like positive, like, let's actually do something about this. What do I have control of? What do I have the ability to change?
Yeah, I find it helps with giving some hope, and especially when there's been like a long-term situation, long-term illness, long-term what's happening with the pandemic is long-term now, so, and our politics, all of that, the longer it goes on, sometimes you just really get into that negative state about it, and I feel like the gentian is helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any other essences that you're thinking of for this time or this season? Are there aspects we haven't quite covered? There's so many aspects we could talk for hours, but they're kind of to help us in this moment, to what we're advising and what we're recommending in this moment.
Yeah, that Oregon grape flower essence can help to see the goodness of others. So it's another thing, just this is more of what's happening in our world today, where distrust and yes, we do need to cultivate discernment, but that's another thing than thinking that everybody is out to get you, thinking that everybody has the worst intentions instead of the best intentions. And so I like to bring in Oregon grape when that's sort of a part of the mental picture.
I love that essence too. The qualification that I look at when I'm thinking about that essence is that I look for that word hostility, and it's that active sort of aggressively pushing away kind of energetically when someone feels like they're about to be overwhelmed on a regular basis, or whenever they feel a little vulnerable, they get prickly. And that's kind of that Oregon grape thing. Have you ever met the plant in person? It's really lovely.
No, the herb, yes, the root, but not the live plant. No.
Yeah, it has like holly-like leaves, and it's a little bit kind of stiff and prickly, the plant itself, and so it has this quality of sort of pushing away. But it also has lovely berries, lovely fruit that people actually make jam with and such. But yeah, Oregon grape is a good one for that irritability that turns into hostility, and that helps. It's really. It really, if there was a flower essence of the year, probably that would be it, because that energetic is everywhere. You see it where people, who, we should be neighbors, we should be coworkers, we should be, co-creators of the world, and yet there's just this energetic of sniping and hostility, and it's troubling to see this in the world. And maybe Oregon grape would be good for those of us who are very sad about it and sad about that energetic, so that we can help shift that, at least in ourselves. We can shift, and then we can help shift that energetic out into the world.
Absolutely. Are there any others that you wanted to throw in?
This is a little bit, it's slightly aside, but I would like to talk about mimulus a little bit. Mimulus fits into this pattern of the anxiety, and it's, classically it's for known fears, so things that you can put your finger on, define, I know what this is, that's distressing me. But the mimulus character tends to be sort of timid and worrying, but also is really trying to control things. So it just would like to, fix it by doing this. And you can start to get into these anxious behaviors, non-productive behaviors, in order to attempt to control things which are really, truly out of our control. And mimulus helps you to find a sense of courage, of trust that this will work out, that I have capacity to make changes in order to make, to do what I need to do to take care of myself, and then also to sort of just allow what will happen otherwise. Mimulus it's a really wonderful essence for so many people, and I use it in animals a lot too. But it's a lovely little plant, and I love to encounter it everywhere I go. I see it up in the hillsides and waterways, and it has this quality of growing in these seeps and in the wet places. So it's very balancing for the emotions. That watery realm balances the sky and the water. It's a lovely little plant. I'm sure you've met it in real life too.
And I do. It's just a wonderful flower essence. It's so I use it a lot, and it's so helpful for the those anxious thoughts that are all coming from some sort of fear, whether it's conscious or subconscious. That just breeds that sort of low-level anxiety. I think that the mimulus is a really great one to add. Absolutely.
Yeah. So this has been a lovely discussion. I'm glad that we took the time today to talk about this season and sort of the challenges and maybe the good parts about this season as well. And we really appreciate you joining us and being with us on the podcast, and hope that you've enjoyed listening, and hope that you've gotten a few tools and a few ideas for ways that you can help support yourself in this really, really challenging time. And I hope that you connect to nature and perhaps try some of these essences to see how they work for you, and let us know how you do. Let us know how things are going with you. We really like to hear from our listeners, and we want to hear from you. We're on Facebook and Instagram, and we love comments. We really appreciate them. They're always fun to have people responding to what we're doing here. And if you feel so inclined, we would absolutely adore a review or some stars on iTunes. That helps other people to find the podcast. And we just really are compelled to share this message from nature to help support all of us in this crazy, wild, challenging, transformational passage that we're all going through together with nature. So thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Until next time.
Bye-bye now. You've been listening to the Flower Essence Podcast with Rochana Felde and Kathleen Aspenns, and we appreciate your interest in connecting with nature on a deeper level. You can find us online at thefloweressencepodcast.com or join us on Facebook and continue the discussion.
This podcast is meant for educational and entertainment purposes only. We are not physicians and do not diagnose, prescribe, or treat medical conditions. Please consult with your own physician or healthcare practitioner regarding the suggestions and recommendations made by the hosts and guests of the Flower Essence Podcast.